I would like to call the Transportation Committee meeting of September 13th to order at 4:02 p.m. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us. At this time, we will take a roll call. To my right.
Alderman Savage present.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles present.
All right, all are present. At this time, I'll entertain approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Great. The agenda is approved. Next up on our agenda, I'll entertain a motion for approval of our 7/12/23 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Next up on our agenda, we have appointments and reappointments. We have 3 people for reappointments on the Transportation Board. Do we want to move them all 3 at once, or do we want to have a discussion?
Could we, well, the first one's a new appointment. Could we do that one
sorry.
separately?
Sure.
I would, yeah. I'd move AP 2423, the appointment of Mr. Hugh Hayes. Is Mr. So I'd move for that.
A second?
Second.
Did we ask him to say anything? Would you like to say anything before the board?
I'm just excited to eventually join the board.
To the mic.
Just have to push the green button, please.
I'm just excited to potentially join the board and help out in any way that I can.
Thank you. Can you state your name and address for us?
Hugh Hayes, 313 Chesapeake Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Any questions? Alderman Savage?
Yeah, I appreciate it. It sounds like you have enthusiastic interest in transportation based on your comments in your application. Could you go into that a little bit for the public?
Yeah, sure. I actually wrote something. You want to just sort of read that real quick?
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, like you mentioned, I'm very passionate about making Annapolis a better city in regards to walking, biking, and the overall transportation network. With Annapolis' unique challenges with geography, there'll never be enough space for everyone to use a car to complete every single trip. I think the only real transportation solution for Annapolis is a holistic, multimodal approach that improves the Annapolis bus, ferry, bike, and walking infrastructure, and then ties them all together. I've worked on a number of small little projects to sort of help push Annapolis in the right direction. I've worked with the city to add bike racks to most of the street end parks in Eastport. I worked with the city to get a crosswalk put in at 4th and Chesapeake. I'm a member on the city's West East Express Trail Advisory Group and another of other initiatives. So I just hope I can be helpful and really excited to get started.
Great. Thank you. Alderman Pendell Charles?
No questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you.
And I started to look at your website.
Oh, yeah.
It's really fascinating. The history of some of the trains and ferries, trolleys in the city, in the area.
Hopefully we'll get one back here sometime.
Be nice, yeah.
That would be really nice. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Yeah, thank you.
I will take a motion for a favorable recommendation to the council.
So moved.
Mr. Hughes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we send a favorable recommendation to the council, and it'll be heard before our next meeting on the 26th of September. Thank you.
You don't need to go to that unless you want to. Could I move AP 25 and AP 26, 23?
Is that a motion?
Yes. Like to
Is there a second?
make a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. The motion passes for a favorable recommendation for AP 25 and AP 26 to move towards council.
And that's Vince Harriman and Charles Brooks.
Correct. Thank you. Next on our agenda is general discussion, ID 5223, which is Annapolis Premium Parking. And I believe that we have some gentlemen here from Annapolis Premium Parking. If you would like to come to the table and introduce yourselves and state your address.
Hello, I'm Brendan Bodensteiner, Market President, Premium Parking.
Chester Escobar, Vice President for Premium Parking East Coast. Address is 601 Poydras Street, New Orleans, 70130.
Thank you very much. One of the reasons why, oh, sorry, Director Moore.
Marcus Moore, Director of Transportation and Parking, City of Annapolis.
Thank you for joining us, Director Moore. One of the reasons why we asked, there's been a lot of comments and public testimony and questions and hopefully some answers from you in regards to where we are with the new Hillman Garage, some of the issues that have been going on in July and August, how they're being resolved. I'm going to bunch all of that into it. If you guys want to talk about that, and I know that we've got some questions from our committee. So if you want to talk about that first, kind of give us an update on where we are with the garage.
Sure. Some of the exciting things we're working on right now, we are looking at event uses on the garage to add more of a community element to the facility. Some ideas such as farmers market, different holiday markets. There are certainly days where the facility is being underutilized, and we are looking at ways to use the facility in ways that do connect with the community. On the notes of, underutilization, we do realize there is a wait list for subscription parking, monthly parking. We have been adding people in small increments of 10 and 20 because we are closely managing occupancy. So we are dwindling, chipping away at the wait list. Our concerns are specifically occupancies on Fridays and Saturdays where the garage can get very close to full. We do not want to set people up for monthly parking if we cannot guarantee them a space and still serve the other public needs that are being used at the garage. As far as we do realize the biggest issue at the garage was the LPR enforcement issue early on. That was a result of some mapping with the integration at Park Mobile. So we have been working with the Park Mobile team. The integration is complete. It is in working order. We are just waiting for Park Mobile to finish the last steps of the remapping on their side. Our agents are enforcing Park Mobile transactions, so nobody's getting erroneous tickets anymore that have made the Park Mobile purchase. However, it's not an optimized process for us. It does slow us down a little bit having to use two systems. So we're hoping by the end of the month, we will be able to get back into our optimized enforcement strategy, which will help us scan at least double the volume of cars in the same amount of time. I would also like to acknowledge we could have handled the situation better. When a violator is identified, we don't know who that car belongs to. We don't know what type of parker it is. All we have is a physical address. If we did have phone numbers and emails, we were prepared to proactively reach out. However, we thought with physical addresses, limited to the option of putting a letter in the mail, that wasn't going to be a fast enough process, and that the people who were miscited would have reached out to us before they would have ever received a letter. So everybody who did submit an appeal, the tickets were voided immediately before appeals were even issued. So as soon as we recognized the issue, citations, no appeal required, were voided. However, in hindsight, I wish we had sent that letter out. I think it would have been a good gesture to the community just to see that we reached out. So going forward, we realize, even if we do have to rely on the United States Postal Service as our fastest option to reach our end users, our customers, that's what we'll have to do. However, the longer we're here, the more customers we interact with, the more people we have record for and have emails, have phone numbers. So as we continue to operate, we have more robust options to communicate to people.
Just to add to that, so, some of the things we've identified, we sort of put them in three categories. The first one is functionality, ease of use, how well are our signage being, is our signage effective? So on the functionality side, we have initiated a new signage package that provides a little bit more direction on when to pay for parking, because we think that that's an issue. And then we're trying to reduce the confusion on whether you can pay with one app or the other. So we're going to do that through our good sign package. We're also going to add signs in the middle of the garage where you have those pillars. So we're going to add those signs there. We're also working with the city, pending an approval from Medco, to go ahead and put a signboard that basically provides information for the general public. Nothing to do with the parking, but more about city projects and so forth. So we're working on that as well. On the communication side, we hosted several calls with city employees to talk about some of these issues and to have a better resource for where all this information resides. We wanted to make sure that when they call our number, when they send an email, everything is the same consistent message going out to the general public. So we're working on that right now. To that end, one of the things that we've done also is we've created a new email address, and the email address will have Annapolis on it, so that's also going to be brought out. So some of these things are still in the works, but we will roll them out. And then the last part of the items is outreach. Are we doing enough to go out there and look at people in the eyes and explain to them what we're doing out here? We try to do that all the time. I think, Brendan is great at going up and down Main Street and throughout into the shops and into when, anybody that listens, we'll talk to them. We try to do that, but I think we want to do that in a more focused manner. Go out to the farmer's market, go out to some of the Thursday, events and so forth. So we're also having that. So those are the three areas from a corporate side that we have identified as important to the success of this project.
Thank you. Do you have questions?
No questions, but just some comments, because as you know, we had some real challenges months ago, and that's why we had you come back and you to appear before us as well. But we're constantly looking for more innovative, more engagement, more outreach, and to make things a lot better, because we see what comes through, and sometimes it's not what we expect. And so therefore, we're the ones who sit here on the dais and have to take the jabs. So we're encouraged by what you're letting us know about, and we want to make sure that it is implemented as well. Thank you.
Alderman Savage? No questions. I do have two questions, not necessarily about what you're doing, but sort of going back. Do we have data on the usage of the garage?
Mondays through Thursday, generally, we will have anywhere from 200 to 350 empty spaces out of the 588. We do see that between 9 and 6 p.m., the garage is the most full. On Fridays and Saturdays, Friday evenings specifically, and Saturdays later in the day, there have been weeks where we've been very close to max occupancy. So that's really what we are most closely managing right now. So we are working with Department of Transportation, and we are looking at new products and new offerings, new programs to try to increase utilization on that Monday through Thursday. How can we serve more people's parking needs that aren't being met right now while we have ample inventory without creating a period of disruption on Fridays and Saturdays where there's just not enough space for everybody who wants one. So we're there, depending on day of week, the garage looks very, very different.
Great. My second question has nothing to do with the garage, but it has to do with on-street parking. I know that that's also been a lot of questions and frustrations, especially from our city residents. And are we working on that as well? Are you working on that as well?
Could you elaborate on what some of the specific issues are? I know a lot of the initial issues were visitor codes, having to request them. There was some delays with the Hillman Garage coming online 15 days before the permit season started. And, the volume of requests, we had over, in about 30 days, we had over almost 8,000 requests between the RPP and the Hillman Garage. But we have addressed all of those annual permits. Anybody who has provided the documentation that's required has been issued their annual permit. The 13 codes that they get for the year, which includes 10 codes per month, 25 codes per year, have all been issued to those individuals as well. The 2-hour, I know this is Hillman, but the 2-hour resident codes have all been issued for everybody who has met that criteria. So I think we've definitely improved the RPP process. Next year will be a lot easier as Hillman Garage will be established. We are not going to be hit with two, major influxes or major volume explosions of requests. We would also like to open up next year permit season where people can start requesting earlier in the year. We can get them all set. If they're ready to pay in advance, we can get them all squared away where they don't have to do anything in, May or June when the volume of our requests come in. So we are adjusting those timelines. Our product development team has updated their list on what they're going to be working on for the promo code usage. So some of those functions that will be added, I do not have a time, but they have been officially slated to be included in future development. When you use a promo code and hit the check availability, instead of it just telling you if it's valid or not, it will give you a remaining usage count. And the other main ask that we are working on will be to allow in a single transaction to purchase multiple passes. For example, these are 24-hour passes. If my guest is coming for 3 days, we are going to try to implement a way where the promo code can be used 3 times on a single transaction, so you can buy 3 days opposed to buying 1 day to use the promo code once, buying another day to use the promo code twice, and so on. And then finally, in some of the user interfaces, when you're using the reservation function, so this would be using your code in advance instead of starting in live time, on some of the workflows or purchase channels, you can only buy them at whole hours or 15-minute increments. And we are looking to get reservation functionality to be in live time where you can get granular enough to pick by minute and second.
Great. And do you have data yet on the number of residential 2-hour free passes that have been requested and then have been used, or?
I do not have usage yet, but I can... about 1,890 requests for those passes have been asked. About half of them are valid, and the other half are those who live outside of city lines and do not actually qualify for that code.
So about 900 are valid?
About 900 codes are active, yes.
That's for the garage.
And then one thing I did miss on We had our first successful Park Shop and Dine program rollout earlier this week. We've gotten great feedback from the user. We found a couple specific, I guess, local business needs that we can, build the program a little bit more robust for them and handle. I believe we're going to handle these requests more in a case-by-case scenario, so we can program each code to meet an event's needs instead of trying to generalize everybody's needs. As you know, one business could have a 1-hour event on one day and then want to have a 4-hour event another day. We can really simplify that if we just know that ahead of time. So instead of trying to make a huge inventory of codes and just make everybody fit in the same box, we are going to encourage businesses to reach out to us a little bit early to give us time to customize this program for them. So Park Shop and Dine is active, and we will be working with Downtown Annapolis Partnership. Their ambassadors are going to pass out flyers to the local businesses to launch that program officially.
Great. Thank you. Alderwoman Vanille Charles.
Couple of things. Have you reached out to Mr. Brian Callahan, who's sitting here from the mayor's office, as far as making sure that you can organize and strategize when it comes to different businesses? Because that's one of the things that he's extremely helpful with doing, and he's right here in the audience right now. So that's one resource that you have right here. The second thing I want to mention, back in July on a Sunday, we walked the Bywater corridor looking for issues with parking, issues with traffic, and that sort of thing. And Director Moore was with us, and Mr. Sam Bryce, who's our professional engineer from Public Works, is here in the audience today as well. We had close to 30 residents, and we had representatives from Public Works, from Transportation, as well as from the Police Department to take a look at some of the issues that we have, and we're looking for reports from each one of them to provide to us, to tell us, and of course, Premium is part of all that constituency as well. So thank you so much, and I'm sure Director Moore can brief you if he hasn't already. Thank you so much.
And yes, Brian has been extremely helpful in many parts, especially with the Hillman Garage, EV charger program, being mindful of micro-mobility and how that impacts the garage and on-street, as well as, some of these farmers markets and, event opportunities to better utilize the garage when it's not being fully utilized.
Great. The day we were out on that Sunday was 95 degrees on a Sunday for 2 hours, but we made a lot of headway. But thank you so much again.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Yeah, first question is, so for on-street parking, how many passes can a resident get, a regular pass?
As a visitor pass?
No, just as a resident.
So an annual pass?
Yeah, annual pass, I guess.
So I believe in District 1, they are limited to 3, whereas in District 2, that has less houses and more streets, I believe they're able to get up to 4.
What was the second district you mentioned?
District 2.
All right.
I'll have to check on exactly what the code is to confirm, but I cannot think of a single resident requesting more than 4.
And is that the same price no matter how many you request?
So prices vary based on if you have off-street as an option at your residence. So if you have a garage or if you have a driveway, your permit will cost more. The month you start will dictate the price. So if you start in July, you're getting 12 months. If you start in January, you're getting 6. Starting in January is cheaper. And it gets more expensive for every additional car you add. So your first car will be the cheapest per season price, and the cars beyond that will get more expensive.
Is that set by you or is that set in the code?
That's set in code.
Okay.
We do.
Yeah, I know, just because I'm thinking we're about to hear info about the comp plan, and a lot of it's trying to address parking issues and reduce car usage, at least in some aspect. And so it might be worthwhile to revisit that to see if we want to cap the number of vehicles or just make it prohibitively expensive beyond a certain number, just to limit the amount.
I will say at AnnapolisParking.com, if you do go to the resident permit page, there's a bunch of links that will kind of summarize some of the code that is most relevant to the public. So there is a chart for that pricing.
Okay.
It'll spell out, what makes somebody applicable for a permit or not, what kind of documents they need to provide. So it's kind of a summarized one-stop shop for a lot of the most asked questions.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, I guess, I know the garage hasn't been open too long yet. So maybe for sometime after the new year, it might be good to get this info. But if you can drill down some of the usage, so I'd like to know what the daytime work hour utilization of the garage is, because I want to look at, I guess, how we handle employee parking in the garage. I know that isn't necessarily a question for you, maybe for Mr. Moore, Director Moore, or Mr. Bryce, but I'm not quite clear at the moment. I think last I heard, we allow some of the employees to park in the garage, but not all. Do you know, Director?
Yes, I'm Alderman Savage. That is correct. Per the department head consulting with the city manager, it was decided who, where, when, as far as how long they need to be there, whether it's a 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 7 to 7, or the 24 hours. So yeah, that was taken. First, it was like a straw poll from HR as far as where people, or as far as telecommuting, as far as parking and all. So
Okay.
yeah, that can still also be revisited as we find out usage, which is a very big player in how that works.
It probably too much of a can of worms for today, but maybe
Yeah.
another time.
Yeah, if you would like to
That's all I
schedule
have.
a follow-up meeting, I'd love to, provide whatever kind of detail you
Okay.
guys are interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman.
I don't mind opening a can of worms, especially when it comes to employees and parking. Thank you.
Thank you. My last question is, we had testimony at our council meeting on Monday nights in regards to some of the restaurants and restaurant employees. And I wanted to know if you've heard anything about that, if that's something that we can put on into discussion to possibly look at some type of a program for our restaurant employees that are needing to park downtown. And there seemed to be some question about timing, like they could use the garage, but it was after 4 o'clock. And if their shift starts at 3, they're leaving their jobs to go move a car or whatnot. So is that something that you guys have been working on?
So I do know the employee programs still at GOTS and I believe Park Place as well. Yeah. So those programs are still active. At the Hillman Garage right now, there is no employee parking program. They can park at any time. It is a 24/7 facility. There just wouldn't be any discount program currently. That is one of the things we are most eager to see if we can't put together for a Monday through Thursday, even Sunday evening. While the garage is being less utilized, we see this as a big win because these employees are the ones who are educating the first-time users here. They're the ones who are engaging these parkers. How better to learn how the system works than be a parker and use the system. Also, we understand employee retention right now is, difficult for local businesses, so parking programs can definitely be something, very advantageous to a business owner to help keep a all-star team on their crew. And again, we've got this ample inventory. I'd say Sunday at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the garage starts emptying out all the way till occasionally we'll have a busy Thursday, but you can count on Thursday being readily available, and Friday, at least 200 empty spaces until you start getting into the dinner hours. So employees are definitely one of the first people we've thought about who would benefit us and benefit them.
Great. So we'll keep that communication moving. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? We really appreciate your time today, and thank you for coming out and talking with us through this, and we'll probably have you back in January.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good afternoon.
It's very encouraging.
Next up on our agenda, we have ID 12823, Annapolis Head Transportation Approach. Eric Lushinsky.
Yeah, good afternoon again. Marcus Moore, Director of Transportation and Parking. Giving you some updates of what we've been working on. Our final stages of review for our partner to be with us with the micro transit. We saw 3 presentations back in August, and our team is evaluating them with procurement to make a best and final. So that's right on track as where we thought we would be at the end of this month, first week in October, to get that company on board to deal with the software for us so we can start training in the month of October. So more to follow with that as we get a little closer with it. Also, as we've been talking about our electric carts, since last December, sporadically until, let's say, March of this year, we've been running the electric cart on Friday, Saturday, Sunday from, Calvert Street, the Gott Street Garage, West Street, Church Circle, State Street, around the State Circle, Maryland Avenue and back, about 1.4 miles from 11 till about 6. And we did some numbers last week. We've carried about 1,200 people. And it's taken a while to get there because some days when we started out, we may carry 3 or 4 people, 6 people in a whole 6 hours because they didn't know it was there. And of course, ridership as word of mouth and understanding how it works is moving on. And as most of you know, we're working on the same type of a program for the peninsula in Eastport to do a similar service that will connect the only public garage on Severn Avenue with a lot of the businesses and restaurants throughout the Eastport Peninsula. So we've established a route that some of you have ridden with me that would like to do Saturday and Sunday for those same times, and we'll probably adjust times so we can get more of the dinner crowd. What we hope to do with this is being able to park at the public parking facility on Severn Avenue, so we're not taking up spaces in residential areas or others that becomes a problem, and also helping out the businesses for bringing people down or the workers that are working in these places. One of the questions was, what about coming across the bridge? And as you probably know, with special events, coming across the Spa Creek Bridge can be traumatic, and it can take 30 minutes. But looking at that connection, as you know, this street here, Duke of Gloucester, there's the Green Route bus Monday through Friday every 30 minutes that will connect here, this area, straight down West Street, around the circle and here, to Eastport. And it turns around at Monroe Street and comes back. So the thought was, how about getting folks from the downtown areas over to Eastport? So we do already have a service that's there. It's the Green Route bus, and then the evenings is the Purple Route, and Sundays Purple, and Sundays and holidays. So our biggest thing as far as a mobility plan of what we can do, and of course at the very beginning, it may take a while to build it, and they will come to understand what's going on with it. It is a fair weather vehicle that doesn't have any AC or heat, so having it out there, less than 38 degrees or, ambient temperature over 95, 98 is kind of hard for a driver. But what we're looking at is doing it as best and as most as we can, even in those times when it may be chillier, but these midnight madness days in December, a cart to kind of keep the city moving, keep things going. And that was the biggest thought when the garage was down. But as we're seeing with the Magenta Shuttle and this, keeping things going that we can be a partner with the businesses and show that we care. And I thank you all for taking that initiative to provide us the funding to actually operate and going forward. One of the other problems that we've been addressing with the Eastport community is charter bus parking. And that's a big deal. A lot of them are coming down, and then just, we're trying to define what is standing, stopping parking. What does that definition really mean? We know, stopping to disembark or to load a bus, but what is standing? How does that differ from parking? And some will say, well, if the driver's behind the wheel, he's just standing, but he's still parking and taking up space and all. So we're working on a plan with the help of Public Works, specifically Sam, and our partners with parking contractors, Premium Parking and others, to see what we can do that makes sense. without having a sign that says everything and walk, don't walk, do this, turn left and all. But we need to have something that we can enforce, because in the city of Annapolis, there really isn't bus parking. And we should be telling them, just like the Watermark tours, they were trying to park at City Dock, go and pay at the Navy Stadium or other places. So trying to get them off the peninsula, that's causing problems on Chesapeake, on Severn. And it may only be an hour and a half, but that may be an hour too long for the residents there. So those are things we're working on, and we have a call every 2 weeks that combines both parking contractors and all those that have a vested interest in the parking within our city to kind of address these issues and kind of find solutions. So it's been ongoing. And Alderwoman O'Neill, thank you for being a part of those discussions and help us kind of work through them.
Great. Thank you so much. Yes, Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the downtown, the EV shuttle, what's the name of that one? Is that now the circulator?
The actual bus?
Yeah.
The actual bus is, it used to be called the Circulator, but we're trying to rebrand it and calling it the Magenta Shuttle. So not to be confused with the trolley itself. So that will continue on. That's always been, we played with different routes with it, but it's always been the Circulator, and it's been $1, then it was free, and it was $1. And we've rerouted it now, and finding that to be hugely popular. The times, it runs every day.
The Magenta.
Yeah, the Magenta Shuttle. From 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 6 a.m. to midnight on Friday, 8 a.m. to midnight on Saturday, and 8 to 8 on Sundays. There's 2 shuttles out there Monday through Friday during peak, 6:30 to 10:30 in the morning, and then 3 to 6:30 in the afternoon. In that ridership, when the garage was down, we were carrying 10 times as many as we carried last year when the garage was up. So it's going, the numbers are dropping a bit because the garage is open, but it is still very popular and used quite a bit for a lot of the hotels there, and just connecting. As you know, the further out you go, the cheaper the rates are in the garages. So getting somebody all the way out to Park Place, Knighton, or Gotts for a cheaper rate. And when there's 2 buses out there, it's like, depending on traffic, 8 to 10 minutes. When there's only 1 bus, it's 20 minutes. Depending on the traffic flow and what's going on in the circle, or getting back up Main Street, for example.
So where are you using the electric?
The electric buses as the trolleys right now, the Gotts garage area, so Calvert Street to State Circle and around Prince George Street, College Avenue, St. John Street, back up Calvert. The proposed route in Eastport, let's say we start somewhere around.
Just want to focus on downtown though.
Yes.
That is, is that on the website or on the app? Or is that just a trial?
We branded it as calling like the current. That may be on the website, but I have to check more and see actually how we're marketing it. With our PIO's help, we've done some videos and done some type of marketing, but more than just a Facebook and our website. I don't think it's been advertised much more.
I don't see it on the website at all, or the transit app. I'm looking, because I see the Circulator, the different buses.
The transit app, because those are our fixed route buses. So the trolley is not, because we're kind of looking at those as being a pilot, just like our microtransit will be also. You won't really see that there until we actually establish it. But those are not on the transit app, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I guess one of the things I'm getting at is, depending on where you're running it, now that I'd like to see some of the numbers on the purple Circulator. If the numbers have gone down, again, just environmentally, I'm wondering if we need to be running 2 medium-sized shuttles, diesel shuttles, when could we perhaps remove one of those for a period of the day, off-peak time, to use the EV shuttle? I know the problem with the EV shuttles we currently have is they can't really run in the very warm or very cold, which hopefully we can find a different type of vehicle in the long run, but just curious if you still see the load that supports 2 shuttles.
You're still catching quite a few people, because with the electric cart, that's only not counting the driver, just 5 people. So
Yeah.
you're going to get as many these are actually gas. The shuttles that you see there
Okay.
are gas powered. They're Ford F450s, 16-seater. There's still times where you have standing room, but not as much as it was before, because there could have been a time where you probably put 35 people in there. Quite a few are getting off along the way, specifically downtown employees as well as the courthouse. But the smaller cart for 5 people, probably not. You'd probably need at least double that, like the size of a van, a 10-passenger van. There is a thought we can reevaluate it, and I can give you numbers at our next meeting next month. But what do the numbers look like Monday through Friday when we are running 2? Because the 2 are coming in at peak time. So I know clearly between like 7 and 8:30, 9 o'clock, they are busy. But we take it off at 10:30 and put it back on at 3. But now, like you mentioned, with the garage open, is there a need to still have a second one operating? The one that's there is still catching quite a few riders, more than a few thousand in a month. It's that many.
Yeah.
I wish I could. I don't want to really guess, but it's still several hundred a day.
Okay. Now, what's the goal what's the purpose of the circulator versus the purpose of the current EV shuttle?
The EV was really getting to places that size of a bus can't go.
Okay.
So when you look at State Circle, we can get it down Maryland Avenue and around, but still, connecting those areas at that juncture. In about 2 weeks or so, they're going to do some major work on the inner perimeter of State Circle, which is going to make it even worse to get, you got to be very, very careful with it. Just a car, let alone that size of a bus or van going around there. And that's going to go on for probably more than 12 or 18 months with that wall on the inner part of that circle. So that was what we're trying to really connect. Because there are other garages nearby other than just Scott's. Obviously, you have the Calvert Street garage and others that can be used by state employees. But just connecting those businesses on Maryland Avenue and other restaurants and boutiques and all. So when you look at the difference there, the Magenta shuttle, the circulator is rebranded, is really, just connecting the city, getting around a lot quicker than what we have as far as a fixed route. So coming down West Street to Duke of Gloucester or Main Street is just the green route bus that you actually could take every 30 minutes. So it gives you just a little bit more. If people are parking at the garages further out going to City Dock and things of that nature. So that's still a part of our fixed route service.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you have a question?
No questions?
Thank you very much, Director.
Thank you.
Appreciate the update. We'll move on to Eric Lashinsky.
All right. Thank you, Alderwoman O'Neill. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. So just want to acknowledge that this is, the presentation was started July 12th, which is the reason why there's a July date on this, not today's date. I honestly can't remember where we left off in July, but I know we did the micromobility update, and I'm happy to give more presentation, but I also, if it makes sense to just go straight to questions, I'm okay with that too. I mean, the few brief intro remarks I would say would be that the presentation just following this related to the Bikeways Standards project we've been working on is directly related to recommendations in this comprehensive plan, and we're trying to get a jump start on. And so they're intimately linked, and that's because Annapolis hasn't really fundamentally changed in terms of its geography since the last time we did a comprehensive plan. We're still a peninsula. We're still very constrained by our roadways. We're building very few new roadways or widening existing roadways. In terms of improving people's ability to get around and address equity issues where people may not have a personal vehicle, and that shouldn't be the driver of their success in the city, we're trying to move the needle on mobility through other ways of getting around, whether it's taking transit, walking, riding a bike, taking a ferry. And those things should be safe and comfortable for people who live here, people who visit here, who work here. So a lot of what you see in the chapter on transportation in this comprehensive plan draft is trying to move the needle on those things. And if we can do that, we're going to improve traffic congestion or reduce traffic congestion. We're going to reduce vehicle emissions and improve our air quality. We're going to enable people to get around safer and easier. And so those are the bigger themes in this chapter. But would you like me to go through some of the slides? I'm happy to do that. I just don't want to be redundant if that's.
Yeah. I think we have some specific questions, Alderman Savage.
Yeah, my suggestion, because I think you made it through most of the presentation, or all of it, but we kind of left off at some of the goals. So I'm starting on page 188 of the plan itself.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure that the goal sheets are in the presentation, but unfortunately, that's it's really just the kind of background content, that supports the goals and recommended actions. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Can I ask a question on this?
Yes, sir.
So for me, so I'm reading through it again today, particularly the goals. So looking at some of my older notes and trying to really get an understanding of what you're trying to get at with some of the goals. Because frankly, I find some of the wording a little confusing with some of the goals. You try to fit a lot in there. So for the first goal, transportation goal, it really boils down to, you talk about shift the mix of mobility investments towards public transit, micro-mobility, ride-sharing, active transportation, and support for telework options to double the usage of these modes by 2040. And the performance measure for that is capital investment dollars. But when I was trying to get a good understanding of that, I think what you're trying to accomplish with that is simply reducing our dependence on cars.
Yeah.
Right? Because you mentioned public transit, micromobility, ride sharing, active transportation, which I like walking and biking, I think, right? And then supporting telework options. And the underlying goal is reducing car usage or dependency, right? And so that, I think, is a much clearer goal, even if you just highlight it somewhere, because each of the goals, you have 4 of them, have a different theme to them, right? The number 2 has to do with building a policy environment in Annapolis that's mode neutral, equitable, oriented to safety, and prioritizes connectivity of the streets, sidewalks, and trails. That one seems to focus in on just safety and connectivity. The third one is transportation will take a leadership role in creating a greener and healthier Annapolis to sustain the economic, environmental, and social quality of the city. That really just comes down to sustainable transportation and mobility. And the last one talks about transportation partnerships, working with other groups. So I'm just saying, from my impression is it can, unless you're really reading through, and I was trying to look through the goals and trying to figure out common themes, it might be helpful to add some kind of header or just to shorten some of them. Because like for the first goal, where you mentioned investment, it's, the goal is not necessarily just shifting investments. The goal ultimately would be getting towards that point of reducing dependency on cars, right? And that's why you list all those different actions, but there could be, and so the actions you list include improving the bike network, building the WE, expanding micro-mobility options, implementing no fare, improving service ridership of transit, connect transit to regional hubs, establish MTA rush hour stops, e-ferry, and so again, I think just something a little broader would be helpful. The a little more general. The one under the recommended actions. Let's see. I'll send all this to you.
Thank
But
you.
just a couple of highlights. So under the recommended, well, first of all, is that kind of an accurate summary of those goals that you have listed here?
Yes, yeah. Particularly with that first one, I understand the wordiness of it. It is fundamentally about reducing the dependency on personal vehicles. I mean, I think I will candidly, you know, when I give presentations about the multimodal transportation products we're doing, meaning bike, pedestrian, transit, people often interpret that we're going to be forcing them to to do these other things, and that's not true. And so I'm constantly trying to, let people know that it is about reducing dependency on the car, particularly for short trips. That I've been in community meetings where people confess to driving to a CVS that's 1 block away because it's too safe to cross the street. So it's those kind of trips that we really, that's a major source of dependency today in Annapolis, and that's the low-hanging fruit, I would say, to try to reduce. But we wanted to address that it's increasing those other modes rather than reducing vehicle. But I see what you're saying, and I think that we can look at trying to make that more straightforward.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And just a couple of specific comments on this goal. You listed as T1.5, implementing a no-fare pilot program for public transit to encourage more ridership and test its feasibility. My one concern with that is that, the council's already rejected that idea for the time being. I know the transportation board supports it, but the council's already rejected it. So I think maybe something as far as something more akin to exploring ways to encourage more ridership, including things such as fare-free, and I'm sure there are other ways, because again, the underlying goal is to get people to use these other modes of transportation, and by further improving our transit program.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean it's not the only way to expand ridership, but a lot of places are seeing the benefits of that. But I understand what you're saying. It's been vetted. I think there's probably some additional information that's needed to have it make sense, for a city. So.
Yeah. And I think it'd be good to flesh out somewhere what you mean by reimagining Annapolis transit. We're in the T1.6, and then again, just a quick comment. In T19, you're talking about working with MTA and private commuter bus services to establish rush hour stops. Just wondering how that differs, because you already mentioned previously about small mobility hubs, but this sounds a little bit larger than that. Are you envisioning something like a larger
Yes.
hub? Like I know the county is looking to put something larger in on Riva Road.
That recommendation actually came specifically from the Forest Drive Eastport Sectors Task Force that was created by the council. When the sector study was put on hold and the task force was created, and they issued a final report. There's a number of recommendations in here that came out of that report, and this is one of them. And essentially the idea is, if the commuter buses that pick up at Riva Road had other stops along Forest Drive, that perhaps we could reduce the number of people that are simply driving Forest Drive and Aris T. Allen to get to Riva Road every morning, thereby reducing the traffic on Forest Drive, that perhaps at the Bay Forest Shopping Center where the Giant supermarket is, that there could be a hub there, some kind of park and ride, since there's a lot of underutilized parking there. I don't know how many spaces per se, but I thought that was a good idea. And just looking at ways to reduce congestion on Forest Drive.
Yeah. So I'll pause there, but just say, again, the reason why I'm kind of pushing to look at rewording some of these goals would be, I'm trying to think at the end of all this, and I'm going to bring this up in Environmental Matters too, is getting something that's going to be easily used by the council, future councils, and by the public. And it's a very thorough document, and it takes a long time to read through, even for us who are, read through these things for a living. And I would love to see some kind of executive summary, something along those lines for the whole thing. Because again, I think a lot of the meat and potatoes are in these goals and the recommended actions that you're highlighting. And so I think it'd be helpful for the council as we review this, but also the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Pendel Charles has a
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've talked about this before, Mr. Lashinsky, and about the gentleman who raised the question about CVS on Forest Drive, who was coming from Ward 3. And one thing I want to bring to the attention, I think is worth noting here, and this is a personal story. My parents were elderly, and I'm an only child. My mother had Parkinson's for 30 years. My dad was a diabetic for half his life for 45 years. In the middle of all taking them and shuttling them back and forth to their doctor's appointments and picking up their prescriptions from CVS, I still had 2 teenagers and young people, or younger when they were younger, shuttling them back and forth to events and activities. Now, it would not make a whole lot of sense for me to try to get my parents on a bus or a bird or any other kind of transit opportunity. It just doesn't make any sense. And I'll be honest with you, my dilemma or challenge was not unusual for many African-American families in the city, which brings up the equity question. But I think within these goals and approaches, I think we should make note that we recognize that some people just can't ride a bus or a bird or a bike because it's not feasible and it's not time. It's not a good use of time. I couldn't put my 85-year-old parents on a bus and take them to Anne Arundel Medical for their doctor's appointments, and then try to get my kids to Annapolis Middle or Annapolis High School for their events at the same time. It just wasn't feasible. And I think we need to, I applaud, and I think we do need to be able to use a vast amount of multimodal transit opportunities. But I think we still need to be practical and say, it just doesn't work for some. And as I've said to some of my colleagues on the dais, don't get old.
Yeah, your point's well taken. We can definitely add that kind of comment. And, for the record, I will continue to use my own personal vehicle to do grocery shopping and so forth. I mean, yeah, it goes without saying that there's certain trips that don't make sense. If you have a car, you'll use it, so.
And if you can use a bike or bird or whatever, a bus, that's good. But I think we need to recognize other people in our communities that just don't have that. And if we don't embed that within the comp plan, we're pretty much ignoring their circumstances.
Right.
But we've talked about that before. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief. So on the other goal, just to comment on this, the T2, which is building a policy environment in Annapolis that's mode neutral, equitable, oriented to safety, and prioritizes connectivity to the city's streets, sidewalks, trails. Let's see. So I'm not quite clear just from that, what you mean by policy environment? Is that for staff? Is it for council? Is it for public? Is it for like, I don't know. I'm just not entirely sure what you mean by that.
So when we talk about transportation policy in the city, we don't have a published transportation policy per se. There's not like a white paper that says it's really the comprehensive plan, and I would say the range of legislation that comes out related to transportation, and the way we permit projects and the kind of considerations that we take into account when we look at new development. And today in Annapolis, while we do have considerations for non-automotive vehicles in our adequate public facilities ordinance, and we regularly do legislation related to non-automotive ways of getting around and transit. We just basically want to ensure that there is that those types of initiatives are welcome and kind of on the same footing as initiatives aimed at improving somebody's ability to park a car, for example. I think what happens is, particularly in a lot of recent discussions about, the changes to the parking requirements that have come up, at city council, legislation, et cetera. One of the first questions is, well, by requiring a certain amount of parking, we're basically encouraging people to drive to these places. And there's a certain reality to that for some people. But we want to make sure that we're looking at other ways of improving people's ability to get around other than just, and so I think today there is a disproportionate amount of focus on, making sure that we can park vehicles. And at some point, it's really hard, and to know how to change that policy environment, but it's there today, and then we're just trying to, perhaps incrementally say that there are ways to move the needle in the other direction. Yeah. So,
yeah, absolutely. And since you mentioned, that's helpful to hear. And I think one of the things you mentioned, the APF, adequate public facilities. That's one thing actually I noticed with the draft that was introduced, is that it doesn't, and that was one of my criticisms in the comments, was that it didn't address or mention, I think, microtransit or multimodal. It was focused on, it was kind of had a limited focus. And so I think in what you're saying, I guess in that sense, that kind of policy environment should change as far as looking towards those alternatives, complying with some of the goals that we're going to be putting into the comp plan. But maybe one good way to address that would be in the staff reports that are delivered with legislation. That would be an opportunity for planning and zoning to highlight and recommend changes in the policy directions.
I should also say that the CIP is another really big place where, the policy and, direction is present. I think in the way that we budget for the city and the money we put towards different projects, that's definitely indicative of the policy values.
Yeah, and real quick, since a colleague mentioned it from Ward 3, the seniors and active transportation, I remember that was one of my thoughts while reading that section, is seniors weren't really addressed at all. And I think that would be good to, here I am saying that the comp plan's too long, but I think it'd be good to add some text about seniors, and so they're not forgotten.
We have gotten that comment from a few folks. It's an excellent comment. I think it's, no, I will not dispute that at all, because I think, we have a fast growing senior population in the city, and we're figuring out how to, highlight that demographic in this comprehensive plan is important.
And just to point out one more in this section, the 2.1 recommended action, which is to adopt a complete street policy and design manual to guide every public and private development project through planning, design, and maintenance. I think that's good, but my comment, and this is a similar comment which I'll have on some of the environmental action items, is that for an action, I think we need more than just a manual to be created, right? To achieve complete streets, we need to, and also to achieve this, we need to impact more than just new development projects, because really there aren't that many new large development projects we're going to have an opportunity to have this applied to, right? Large projects that are impacting streets. And so I think to really transition to complete streets, we need something that's going to apply to existing. Which means it's going to have to get worked into our annual paving program somehow, right? So roads, I think one of the things the comp plan could do is prioritize roads, neighborhoods that should be converted to complete streets. And yes, I'm going to take the opportunity to say Edgewood Road would be a good opportunity for conversion, but I think the comp plan could identify some that can be incorporated into that, either the paving program or as a CIP project, because if we're waiting for new development, it's going to be forever till that happens. And again, I'm picking this one out because I think that's a theme I've seen in some of the action items where they're just looking towards future development instead of how do we convert what we have currently.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One other thing I want to mention, I'm just thinking, when we talk about vehicles, and if you have older people, and I'll go back to my own situation, we had to buy a van. And then when the van went away, we had to buy a bigger SUV, because you're talking about maybe a wheelchair, a walker, a cane. You can't always get those in smaller vehicles.
And there are some more coming in. I've got a couple constituents that have sent me emails that I'll be forwarding to you as well. So we appreciate your time today.
All right, you bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
And we are ready to move on to ID 14523, which is bikeway standards.
I'm going to stay up here, actually. But welcome our consultant.
Introduce yourself.
No, if you guys want to come up too.
Hello, I'm Barbara Mosier from Tool Design, consultant to the city on this project.
Thank you for coming.
Okay.
And just a brief introduction that this project was prioritized because we have a challenging city when we're trying to retrofit roadways, to do anything more than just basic parking and moving vehicles, freight. Every single street almost requires a kind of a custom design to incorporate bikes. And when we did our 2011 bicycle master plan, it was in 2011. It was more than 10 years ago. A lot has changed in the industry, and there are standards out there that didn't exist. And we were able to get a grant through the Baltimore Metropolitan Council's, it's called their TLC program, Transportation and Land Use Connections program, small grants program. And it's actually, the BMC did the job of finding qualified consultants to do the work. They just asked for jurisdictions to apply for relatively small grant projects, and they would then place a consultant with us. And so we did that, and we got paired up with Tool Design, and they had just completed the Anne Arundel County Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan. They've done work in the city. They actually worked on our 2011 Bike Master Plan, so it was a good fit, and we've been working on this project since then. You know the other folks at the table, but they're part of the review team as well. So.
Can we just have you say your names for the record? Thank you.
Sam Bryce, I'm Chief of the Bureau of Engineering and Construction and Public Works.
Brian
Brian Callahan, the mayor's office.
Thank you.
Should I go ahead and jump in? Yeah. Okay. Thanks for having me here today. So just as a general overview of what I'm going to cover, the presentation's about 20, 25 minutes. Feel free to jump in with questions wherever along the way.
I think she only has, what time did you want to end the meeting?
I can talk fast if I need to. Fully capable of that. Okay, so the purpose of the draft memorandum that we've put together is to sort of provide an update to bikeway guidance that has come out since the bike plan in 2011. So there's been a lot of change since then. And this is sort of just summarizing best practices throughout the industry with some focus on issues specific to Annapolis. We've got a draft memo in, we've received some feedback, we're working on those changes. If there's any additional changes based on the feedback today, we'll incorporate those, and then we're going to be finalizing the memo. Just some background on who I am, who I work for. So Tool Design is a specifically multimodal engineering and design company or planning and design company. We are headquartered in Maryland. Currently, our headquarter office is in Silver Spring. We're now, across North America with offices in every region, including Canada. We work pretty extensively on design guidance across the country, including a lot of federal level guidance and state level, state DOT guidance and city guidance, including the AASHTO Bikeway Design Guide, the current version. We were the lead authors, as well as the upcoming draft. So we're very in the middle of all bike guidance across the country. Regionally, Eric mentioned we worked on the Walk and Roll Anne Arundel Plan, as well as ongoing work in Anne Arundel County on safe routes to school. We also worked on the Baltimore Complete Streets Manual and several other Complete Streets Manuals across the country and bikeway design guides. And then just some other, we also work on specific design projects. And this is just a selection of those in the area. So just the memo itself sort of discusses the planning context that we're working within, with, the old comp plan obviously currently being updated, the existing bicycle master plan from 2011, and then the newer plans that are sort of happening with your immediate neighbors as well as in the city, and how all of that is evolving. And then the goal here is that we want to help create a connected network of facilities. And obviously, like Eric said, this is really looking to help support some of the goals to help the city move forward with multimodal facilities in a sort of organized way. Because the whole point of this guidance is to set the stage for implementation, figuring out concretely, okay, if we're going to build more bike facilities, what do they look like? How are we going to implement them? How can we work through the paving program, for instance, to retrofit facilities, and how does that decision-making process work? So an overview of the document itself. Just want to acknowledge that the document acknowledges this, is that every project has context-specific elements. Not every bit of guidance is going to work for every single facility, and every single facility is going to have to look at what is happening on that roadway, what is the width available, how is it being used, but having sort of underlying guidance can help set the path in a predictable way. So the memo runs through several sections, planning considerations, defining what these bike facilities we're talking about are, so everyone's using the same language to mean the same things. That's an issue more often than you'd think. Aligning who our goal users are for bike facilities, and then getting into the nitty-gritty of facility widths, buffers, materials, things like that, and then wayfinding and signage best practices. The memo references a number of documents that, specific like Maryland MUTCD that we have to follow here, and then also national and state level guidance that Tool Design has worked on, I think everything here is things that we've worked on or things that we have contributed to, or just generally industry best practices. So the first section of the document talks through sort of planning considerations for the decision-making process for creating bike networks, with the primary goals being safety, comfort, and connectivity, and then sort of secondary goals being directness, cohesion, attractiveness, and unbroken flow, which are a little more wonky, but are defined. Generally, Annapolis has a lot of roadways that are LT at level of traffic stress 1 or 2, which means that they are comfortable for most users. Generally, it's the main roadways, and I don't think that comes as any shock, are more in sort of the level of traffic stress 3 or 4. So there are a lot of existing routes that are very low stress in Annapolis, and sort of the challenge is the wayfinding and connectivity and sort of the missing gaps where you know, because it is a peninsula, because there are some of those areas that you can't get there from here without coming out on the main road. So this sort of analysis really helps ID where those gaps are. The document, and this is a pretty standard in the industry at this point, defines types of users with the idea based on prior research on just the population at large, including, you know, people who do have cars, people who don't have cars, and how they feel about biking. With, you know, 7% being those people who you see out there biking in all conditions on all roads, 5% being in the enthusiastic and confident, is where I fall personally, where, you know, they're willing to ride, they're not totally fearless, but they're out there. And then the big bulk of where most people fall is the 51% interested but concerned, people who state that they would like to ride or they would feel comfortable riding if there was just a better facility for them. The general gist of the planning context of the document is that those 51% are the goal of who we're trying to design for. Just touching on some specific sort of destinations. In the 2011 plan, there were key destinations outlined. I think most of those are still hold. You know, talking about the Arts District, City Dock, Pearl Town Center, the Annapolis Mall, that those are the kinds of places people are trying to get to. Looking at street types in Annapolis, we sort of touch on the kinds of roads that, you know, generally the city of Annapolis is not the kind of place that is full of 6-lane arterials. Most of the roads are constrained, they are narrow. They're also very flat, which makes them friendly for biking. So that's a definite plus. So the types of bike facilities that the document discusses, and these are mostly examples from in your city, with one exception, because we don't have a good buffered bike lane quite yet. But we've got sort of standard bike lanes, which are just the general like painted bike lane immediately adjacent to the travel lane, buffered bike lane where there is some painted separation between the bike lane and the travel lane, a truly separated bike lane where there is a vertical element like on Jennifer at Admiral, shared use paths adjacent to the roadway, completely separated, curb that allow for both pedestrians and bikes to share that facility. And then a bicycle boulevard, which is a, you know, low stress, low volume, low speed roadway that's signed or marked in such a way to make it clear that it's intended for use with bikes, but that bikes do share the roadway, share the lane with cars. And then this sort of, there's a lot of information sort of embedded in this diagram right here. One of the critical elements for success is aligning bike facilities with the users. That kind of gets back to those safety, comfort, and connectivity principles, where we want to design a low stress network that is usable for all of these user types, from you know, a child trying to get to school, somebody trying to ride with their family, where they need more separation if there's going to be any kind of like busy traffic happening, up through you know, understanding that on shared roadways, there are still people who will use those. So this is one of the diagrams that shows up in the document. This is currently from the FHWA Bike Selection Guide. It also shows up in a couple other documents throughout the industry at this point, including the draft AASHTO guide that tries to lay out a context of how to make a decision for when bicycle facilities should need to be separated from vehicular facilities based on speed and volume as the primary considerations, though there are obviously other factors like we might have a roadway where the daily volume is low, but there is a particularly high peak volume for an assortment of reasons that makes it uncomfortable during those times. What's the vehicle mix? Do we have a lot of buses? Do we have a lot of trucks? Is there a lot of curbside activity, which makes it harder to implement a standard parking lane because we have dooring issues and people pulling in and out? So there's always going to be more factors and more context, but this is a starting point for identifying a preferred type in terms of just general comfort and the need for separation. So then the next sort of step is that once we've worked through the general plan of what would be nice to have here, is figuring out the feasibility. Obviously, we need to have space to build the desired facility. We need to have funding to build the desired facility. We need to have the ability to maintain the facility. And then there's also the idea of figuring out if we're trying to implement facilities as standalone projects or if it's something that can be wrapped into a larger project or wrapped into a repaving project or wrapped into other monies that are already set to be spent. Some of the key themes that get worked through for all kinds of bike facilities are, is it going to be one-way or two-way? What are the widths? What are the design features and materials? Are we going to be having pavement markings? Will there be some sort of physical barrier, whether it's the flex post that we're all familiar with or something more attractive or lower down or more permanent? What does it do for network connectivity? Does it improve safety? How does it provide access to the destinations we're trying to get people to? How are we dealing with intersections? That's often a major consideration in bikeway design and planning when we can identify that on a general cross-section. We know we want we know what we want it to look like, but then we need to figure out how to get it across some major intersections. And then how does that interact with the existing activities on the given roadway? So now getting into some of the nitty-gritty that's in this facility, in the document in terms of very specific design guidance. We have sort of this level of detail for recommended widths and features for each kind of bike facility. So for instance, for a separated bike facility, sort of this guidance would result in this sort of facility that you see on the right here. And obviously this is a much bigger road than anything you have here, but this is just a good picture that we happen to have of something that's been built. So please pretend the road to the left is much smaller. And then here is something a little more comparable. Similarly, a buffered bike lane. We have recommendations for how wide a standard buffer would be versus a minimally constrained buffer, how we recommend, recommendations for how to deal with door zone buffers and when to provide those and what they should look like. On-road bike lanes, similarly, the recommendations for minimum widths change depending on what you're immediately adjacent to. Are you next to a parking lane? Are you next to a curb? Are you next to more pavement? Is there a shoulder on the other side? And how much usage do you expect? Do you want people to be able to pass each other comfortably? Do you want people to be able to ride side by side? Which all kind of goes back to the planning considerations, where when you start out on one of these projects, that one of the first things you figure out is who you're designing for. So the design specifics in here, sort of that theme carries through. This is bike boulevards. This one I think is particularly relevant in Annapolis because you do have a lot of low volume and low stress roadways that might just need a little bit to make them a viable part of a road network. Depending on roadway, bike boulevards are something that can really vary. Depending on the existing, how many cars you have on it right now, there's a lot of variability between just needing to add some wayfinding and you have a great facility, all the way up to putting in traffic diversion barriers to really cut down on the number of cars using the road to free it up for micromobility and bike usage. So there's sort of a lot of ground that gets covered in the bike boulevard area. And then, which brings us right to wayfinding, which is another one of the topics covered in the memo. Just sort of best practices on how wayfinding can be implemented. Generally, the point of wayfinding is giving people a way to orient themselves and navigate from place to place. The principles that are discussed in the memo are the need to keep it simple, be consistent, the idea that you're designing for someone who is using the system. Someone should be able to just be like, oh, I'm going to go somewhere and get on their bike and figure it out, and not have to be a resident who's lived there for 20 years and already know the way. And that you want to sort of give people information along the way and then let them keep going. It's very frustrating on a bike to have to stop and go every block because you need to stop and like read that sign and figure out what it said. There's sort of 4 stages of navigation in terms of orientation, helping people make decisions, confirming that they made the right decision and they're keeping going the right way, and that they have reached where they're going. And then the other sort of principle in designing wayfinding is setting up your hierarchy of information. So wayfinding is something that can be implemented on just a corridor by corridor basis, but it definitely works better when there is a overall plan in terms of understanding what your regional destinations, local destinations, and sort of mid-level district destinations are. So that, I ran through that pretty quick. Sorry, I talk fast.
We appreciate that.
But that is a general overview of what's in the document, what we tried to cover, and sort of why we tried to cover it. So feel free. Do you have any questions?
Do you have questions? Vindel, Charles?
No. This was wonderful. Thank you.
You're allowed one.
Okay. So I'm thinking about how this ties in with the comp plan and all of our other efforts. And so based on what I'm hearing, so hopefully with the comp plan, which will hopefully identify some or utilize the LTS analysis as well as just all the safety data. I know you've been looking at, Mr. Lashinsky. Because I know I'm thinking there are some streets where we know there have been more deaths, bike accidents than others. So what I'm getting at is, will the comp plan be identifying certain streets or different? I know you have a couple different plans where we need to prioritize work. Hopefully we can make that complete streets, and then this design document will come in as far as developing here are the standards we're going to be looking at when we're designing this. Is that correct? And
yeah, that's correct. There is there are pages in that transportation chapter of the draft comprehensive plan that show the priority corridors, and they're primarily, I would say, based on connecting key destinations, schools, job centers, basically allowing people to get around the entire city efficiently. We should be, I should check to see how we acknowledge this, but yeah, I mean, the level of crash data for a particular corridor probably should have something to do with its prioritization. And we are working, I mean, some of the funded projects today are those Hilltop Lane, the extension there is one of those hot spots, I would say, where there was a death in the last year. I think that this is really going to be most helpful, what Barbara presented, in kind of day-to-day staff work, frankly, in basically ensuring that we're all talking about the same standards that have largely been vetted by other agencies, acknowledging that we have pretty specific circumstances here, but I think it'll help us speak the same language and be sort of realistic in terms of what type of bike facility is appropriate for that location.
Yeah.
And given the space constraints. But we get into situations sometimes where there might be a corridor where the space allows us a certain treatment for the majority of it, and then there's a small section where it's constrained, and that's like an example of where I think it would be helpful to be able to have some guidance on continuing the treatment, even if there's a constrained area and we have to do something a little bit differently. But I think that's where this might be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I can't ask anything else, so I'll just say thank you for your work on this. It's a very important part of the whole process of getting towards our goals for better bike transit. Thank you.
We appreciate your time. It looks like a lot of thought and ideas went into it, and I look forward to seeing it come to fruition as we move towards better biking. And I don't bike because I don't ever know where I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to.
It's okay. We don't do that anymore. You just point which way.
I just want to acknowledge something that maybe I take for granted, but may not be obvious to people who are watching. But I mean, a lot of times our bike projects start in planning and zoning, and then they're implemented by Public Works. And that's why this is really important to me, because I think if we can have a level of reality to the beginning of the project, understand what we're able to do, what makes sense, then I think the projects can be more seamless. So that's a big part of this.
And I think that Eric has said something very important, and that is with our streets and with our area here, not all of these fit everywhere. And I would also add something that I noted, because we have been looking at some of the streets where this goes. And it comes to something that Alderman Savage brought to our attention on Bay Ridge Avenue. We had a sewer main that had a break in it, or a crack in it, and we had to go down on it to repair it. Maintenance is a big issue. And if you start losing with the roadway, maintenance becomes very difficult because you still must maintain traffic while you're doing that maintenance. So, and I've stressed this as we've gone through this process, you have to always bear in mind that maintenance aspect, not related to the bike lane, but related to all the utilities and roadways that we have. You put a BG&E truck out to fix the overhead wires, and he takes up 12, 13 feet. So it's very important that you keep those things in mind. And so everything will not fit in every aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming out today and sitting through the rest of our meeting.
Happy to do it.
Madam Chair, can I mention one other thing to Mr. Lashinsky from the last presentation?
30 seconds or less.
30 seconds or less. One thing I've noticed, because I was working when my parents were ill, but in grocery stores especially, you see a lot of people helping elderly people. They're in scrubs, so they're basically have been people that have hired by the family. So don't forget those people who need their cars and vehicles to transport their clients to and from the grocery store or CVS or whatever. So it's not just the children of the parents, it's also the caregivers as well, who some hired and some not. So just want to mention that tidbit. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. We're going to move on to our last item on our agenda, which is not the least, it's just the last. That's ID 3723, Transportation Board update from Kirk Riegel, Chairman.
I'm Kurt Riegel from 307A Monterey Avenue in Annapolis and chairman of the Annapolis Transportation Board. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you, and welcome back from a vacation. I hope we're all re-energized and reinvigorated. We were on vacation in the Transportation Board, and so this will be fairly short. I want to mention one thing. I'm last on the agenda, and I want to tell you something about how we operate the Transportation Board. That was the custom on the Transportation Board with respect to input from the city, and we realized that was backwards because we needed advice and questions that came from the city prior to our sitting down for our deliberations. We had a very nice presentation here about the new Hillman garage, and I have some observations that they are not here to hear, and that you are not able to ask them questions about. Occasionally, you will be voting on things, and if this item is the last on the agenda, you will do so without the benefit of advice that comes from the Transportation Board.
I will tell you that in the middle of this meeting, I emailed Ms. Jackson and said, for the next few meetings, can we make sure that the Transportation Board report gets moved to the top again?
Thanks so much. I think that's helpful. And I will keep these presentations very short. The next thing is Hillman Garage. A couple of quick remarks. And we have not, in the board, looked at this in a disciplined and all-board fashion. But with respect to the 2-hour free parking, I've had a lot of personal complaints and heard discussion that the process for availing oneself of the 2 hours of free parking is quite complex. In fact, so complex that most people can't figure it out. It requires the entry of codes each and every time it's used, if I understand it correctly. And so I raise a question to you that you might pass on to the contractor. Why is it necessary to enter a code at all? If the license plate is registered and a code has been entered, the information system should have that already built in and should be able to refer internally within the software to that code with no necessity for further data entry. So that's a recommendation for you to pursue with them. There's a question of incentive that I wish you would keep in mind and maybe interact with the contractor over, or have the city interact with the contractor. To what extent is it in the interest of the company that has the contract to make this 2 hours of free parking difficult to take advantage of? Who gets that $2 or the dollars that are connected with that? Does the contractor get the dollars or does the city get the dollars? I suspect it is the former, but you should check on that. Another thing about Hillman, Hillman has a number of EV charging stations. On my way over today, I checked both the Knighton and Hillman garages. The Knighton garage had a space that was occupied by a non-charging vehicle, and Hillman downstairs had 3 non-charging vehicles operating that were occupying charging spaces. I had a chance to talk to one of the employees, Premium Parking, Darla, a very nice woman, and she was under the impression that no fines are being issued for violations of the EV, no parking in EV spaces unless you are charging. So that's something the city might check up on too. Okay, coming to other business. We made a request a long time ago about State House Bill 519. We recommended to the city that you pass another resolution to light some fire under the state Senate with respect to bicycles on sidewalks. This bill has passed on 2 successive years in the House of Delegates, but has failed. Well, it hasn't failed in the Senate. It's never been taken up by the Senate because they have so much business. We really need your help, and I heard from you that you were working on a resolution. It was in draft form, and I kind of expected to see it on Monday, but it did not appear. Can we get that resolution put before the City Council and passed so that we can get the Senate finally to act on this thing? There is no opposition to it. It's got broad support, but the Senate simply has to give some attention to it and vote on it.
We actually tabled it because of the wording on it was basically people were not in agreement with the way it was worded. It was basically us telling the Senate what to do, and we don't actually have that.
I disagree. You have every power to ask the Senate to do something that the city wants.
Yeah,
And
think-
I really, in this case, I think it's very useful to say the city is interested in this issue, and we would like the Senate to take this up.
I think it was a matter of tact. The way it was worded was a bit too aggressive, I think. And I think there are other ways the council could pass a resolution. I think we've done that occasionally. But I think also the mayor could very well, he has a regular meeting with our D30 delegation, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And so I'm sure he'd be happy to bring up something like that to them.
Well, the D30 delegation generally is quite, well, they are all supportive, at least in words, but it's a mechanical thing that has to be done. Sarah Elfreth in the Senate has to arrange for either her to introduce that bill or to have one of her colleagues introduce the bill. And that has not happened. They're dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of big dollar items and really important things. This is tiny. And we don't have anything like a reconciliation mechanism in the state legislature for dealing with tiny things like this. But somehow, it's really important that she be motivated to see that either she or her colleagues brings this to the Senate and gets it voted on. If you have other ways of doing it, that would be fine. I don't care about the mechanism, but I think it's really important that the city council express itself on its desire to see the Senate move on this. Okay. We have two new members with Hugh Hayes and Edward Bergman. I think Edward Bergman is now confirmed by the full council. Hugh has to undergo the same thing. In your last meeting, I think at first reader, you had 03023 on revision of parking district legislation, and that was to be referred to the board, and we will take it up. Are there any other items that I am not aware of that are to be referred to the board?
Something got referred the other night. What was it?
Yeah, we had, there was an adjustment to the downtown parking districts.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. That's
Bloomsbury Square.
3023.
Bloomsbury Square, and then there was,
Two things got. I don't have my council notes here. Sorry.
031 and then 030. And then I think, was the kayak one? No, it was.
Yeah, it was 030 and 031. Both of them were updates and corrections to special residential parking districts and eliminating outdated language.
Oh, there's a 31 as well as a 30. I
Yeah,
didn't
so they were
realize that.
both referred to the board.
Okay, we will take that up then. Thank you. And I guess the last thing, again, having to do with Hillman, I noticed today in the presentation by Premium Parking that, again, and this has been the case for years now, they have a handle on how many 2-hour permits are issued, 2-hour free parking permits are applied for, or in the old system issued in the form of cards. But I tried through the city transportation department for literally years to get information on usage, and it's not available. So you have, unless you have access to data that I have not been able to get, I don't think you have any idea how much money is involved in providing free parking. We don't know how many people use it. And you should know. That's something, it is a cost. And frequently legislatures make, sometimes they have no problems giving away lots of money and they really care about small amounts of money. The fare free thing is an example. We're already paying, we think, 94% of the cost, but the last 6% seems to be something we can't get. And we are quite willing to pay people who own $50,000 cars $5 or $10 for free parking in our garages, but we are unwilling to give a poor person $1 to ride the bus. And I think you should cost these things out. We should know how much these things are costing. And that's all I have.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
I
Sorry,
was
one
looking
question.
up my email records as far as the sidewalk thing, and the one question I have is that, because I think we passed something locally that allows bicycles to go on our sidewalks and scooters.
Yeah, we've done that. The problem is the state law.
But we don't know, I don't know yet which law takes precedence. If we have allowed them locally, I'm not sure if the state law sets a floor or a ceiling as far as,
No, the state law presently says that bicycles are forbidden on sidewalks
I know.
unless local localities act.
And we
And
did.
our recommendation was that you reverse it so that it is allowed unless localities forbid.
Well, but we've already allowed it here.
Yeah,
So we really have no interest in what the state law could help other jurisdictions, but it's not pertinent to Annapolis at this point in time. Because we've already allowed them.
well, that's a point, yeah.
I think that's what you would say.
Yeah,
Okay,
all right. Thank you very much.
you bet.
Being there are no further items on our agenda, I will entertain a motion
Move to
to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.